chapter 10. You know what? These are the last verses of chapter 10. I don't know why I want to see us reach chapter 11, but anyway, that's where we're at.
A long chapter.
Yes, the long chapter. You got it going all right? You're on it. Oh, I know you are. You're on it. I've entitled this, What Would You Do? And you're going to see why I entitled that as we go along. We sometimes use the phrase, it's a divine appointment. When something unexpected occurs with spiritual consequences. When we say to ourselves, what a coincidence, that's what sometimes we'll say. What a coincidence that I happened to meet you, because I'm new to town and I'm looking for a church to go to, and you meet them because they happen to walk into the same bakery that you're sitting in, or their car breaks down and they go to the automotive garage, and the people at the automotive garage say to them, well, if you want to wait for your car to get fixed, you can do that, and there's a place to get coffee right around the corner. And so they go to the corner, and there you are. This happened to us this last Wednesday.
Yeah, it was awesome.
A good example, of course, would be like the one I just gave you. God will manipulate time and space and manipulate the circumstances of our lives in order to achieve what He has in mind to do. So it is an appointment that you needed to meet, but it was a divine appointment. You didn't make the appointment. You had no idea you were going to meet those people that day. You have no idea what was going to occur or whether anything would occur, but there was this appointment that you needed to make, a divine appointment. And so we're in the situation every day where things like that can happen to us, and we just have to recognize sometimes, my biggest thing is, sometimes people, it doesn't fit into your time schedule, like what you're doing for the day, and you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to talk to this lady for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then I'm going to keep on doing what I was doing, keep on going. But all of a sudden you realize that lady needs to talk, and she needs to talk to you. And I learned a while ago that you are always outside. You don't go inside a building. You don't go, no matter how well you know the person. You do this outside where everybody can see you. Keeps you honest. And 2 hours later, you're wondering when this conversation is going to end, because you haven't said 2 words. I haven't said 2 words, which I know is hard to believe. But she is just, I know her whole life story from beginning to end. But it was important. It was in God. I know God thought this is something you need to listen to her. Maybe nobody listens to her. Isn't that the biggest complaint that most, or a lot of girlfriends, wives have when they go into a psychologist and they say, he never listens to me. Well, you know what? That's true. Quite often that is a very true thing. Okay. Jesus, through the Holy Spirit, plans that meeting. It's a divine appointment. Not everything that happens to you is a divine appointment, but believe me, plenty of times. Let's think of one where Jesus was with his disciples, and they were going through a place that probably the disciples never dreamed they would go to, which was Samaria. Samaria was the land that Jews stayed away from because they were all mixed blood people that had been captured by the Assyrians and drug off, and other people had been brought in. And so there's this mixture. They weren't pure blood Jews. And so the pure blood Jews, being the way they are, didn't want us to get anywhere near them. So they would walk around Samaria rather than to go the shortcut through the country. So here's Jesus. He's at a well, right? This is the woman at the well. This is in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, I believe. And so the woman's at the well, and Jesus starts, he sends his disciples away to go get some food to eat, and he talks to the woman at the well. That's a divine appointment. It was a divine appointment because she would have never heard about who Jesus was, or she would have never realized anything about who she was talking to if it hadn't have been for that divine appointment that he had with her. And she ended up, if you remember, it's a great story because he says, yes, sir.
That came on last night.
Did it really?
Yeah, she was down there for about 7 or 11 hours.
I believe that. Yep.
And the mom was trying to look for her, but Jesus came down and got her.
There you go. That's how that works. So here's
It's a divine appointment.
Yeah.
It's a divine appointment. That's right.
That's what it's called. That came on last night.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a divine appointment for you too.
Yeah.
How did that come in the chapter?
I don't know. So here's the woman, and she and Jesus said, "Go and get your husband." And she said, "Oh, I don't have a husband."
That's awesome.
And then he says to her, "You're right to say that. You don't have a husband, and the man you're living with is not your husband, and you've been married 5 times before this."
Wow.
And she just, how did you know? How did you know that? If you've been reading my diary,
That's one of the episodes of The Chosen, by the way. And there's and when he says that, she goes,
well, you know what? When there's a divine appointment, it's just sometimes you buckle your seatbelt because you're going to go for a wild ride, and that's exactly. So you really want to read the rest of that because that's very, very good. Many people, including Jesus and his disciples, were walking to Jerusalem. Now, in order to understand any of this, see, this can mean nothing to you if you don't know a little bit of the topography, the hills and valleys and whatever. But down where the Jordan, well, you know, rivers don't flow at the top of a mountain normally. They flow down at the lowest point. You cross the Jordan River. You go in, I think it's like maybe 4 or 5 miles, and there's Jericho, and you remember the story of Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. Yeah, okay. And so and then it's a slow process of going uphill. And that hill that you're climbing, or that mountain, isn't really not a mountain. The hill that you're climbing is called the Mount of Olives. Sound familiar?
yeah.
The Mount of Olives. You go up to the top of the Mount of Olives, and when you get up to the top, then you start going back down, and then you can see the temple when you get to the top, and so you know where you're headed. This is where Jesus is going, because eventually he's going to walk into Jerusalem, and what's known as the triumphal entry, or what we celebrate as Palm Sunday. So we're a little ahead of where we should be for doing this, but so anyway, so let's look at 46. Let's look at verse 46 and see what we shall see. Okay, so chapter 10, verse 46. Now they came to Jericho. Okay, so they crossed the Jordan River. They've gone that 4 or 5 miles. And they came to Jericho. And by the way, because of, you might be asking yourself, how could they be coming to Jericho? Because didn't the walls of Jericho fall down? Wasn't the city destroyed? How could they come to Jericho? The old city of Jericho, or town of Jericho, had been abandoned. And King Herod the Great, who was a great, for nothing, he was a great builder, if nothing else. He built a new city, probably didn't call it Jericho, that was just, still on this main road, because this was a pilgrim's road. This was a road that pilgrims would take to go to Jerusalem, and they would pass by, at least the road that led into Jericho. They would cross the Jordan and so on, and they would, because some of them would be coming from long distances to go to Jerusalem for the Passover, because that was one of the main holidays that they were mandated by the law of Moses to go and to celebrate. So here's Jesus with all kinds of other people walking along the road. And so as he went out of Jericho with his disciples, so they passed the entrance to Jericho, and he, with his disciples and a great multitude. So there were lots of people that were walking along. Blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, get it? Bar means son of Timaeus.
Bartimaeus.
Yeah, Bartimaeus. Tomatoes. The son of Timaeus sat by the road begging. So if that's the pilgrim's road to Jerusalem, and if you're a beggar, and you make your only livelihood by begging alongside of the road, and people are on a spiritual kind of pilgrimage for Passover, boy, what a great spot to sit and to beg. And giving alms to the poor, ALMS, was looked upon by the Jewish religion as being a really good thing to do. You weren't to ignore the less fortunate. Not a bad attitude to have, right? And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth that was walking by, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And he did that because nobody's going to pay any attention to him. There's a multitude of people walking by, and they're all probably talking among each other. Yeah, and so he wants to make sure. He can't see him, but he's been told he's there, so he's crying out. So you can only imagine what the disciples' reaction was.
That's faith, huh?
Yeah. Well, where did he get Jesus, son of David, from? That's also interesting. 48. Then many warned him to be quiet. Be quiet. I can see you're not deaf and dumb, or blind and dumb. You can talk. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." So Jesus stood still, and he commanded him, Bartimaeus, to be called. Called his disciples. Bring him over here. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, "Be of good cheer. Rise. He's calling you." The disciples knew they had been through a lot of healings with Jesus. And they knew that when Jesus stopped and called his attention to a particular person, he was going to heal him. And so it was important. They knew. This, you won the lottery today, brother. Just get up, come over here. He's calling you. This is your lucky day. This is your lucky day. So, He throws aside his garment. He rose up and he came to Jesus. My guess is he ran to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, verse 51, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "Rabboni," which rabbi is teacher, and
Mine says my great one.
Teacher and master.
Right, my great one, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Why does Jesus always seem to ask what would seem to be the obvious question? Oh, what do you want me to do for you? Well, I really need a new cloak, and I could do with a new pair of sandals. And no, I want to see. I'm blind. You may have noticed I'm blind. I want to see. No, first of all, what did Bartimaeus believe?
The shadow of the night and the gloom of the light.
No, what did Bartimaeus believe that Jesus could do for him?
Healed him.
He believed that Jesus could heal him. He'd heard enough stories probably. He recognized Jesus of Nazareth, not just Jesus, the guy that lives down the street, but Jesus of Nazareth. He's the one that's the healer. He's the one that can do it. He's the one. But where did he get Son of David from? Do you know? Okay, tell me.
Jeremiah 23, verse 5 says, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that I will raise to David a branch of righteousness. A king shall reign and prosper and execute judgment and righteousness in the earth."
Okay.
So it was a prophecy that was given in Jeremiah's
Yeah,
time.
maybe he had heard about that. Maybe he had heard people say, you know what, he might be the Messiah. He might be the promised one that's coming, this Jesus of Nazareth. So if you're a blind person and you've been probably blind your whole life, maybe not, but blind a great deal of your life, you probably would be tempted to say, Son of David. Jesus was in the lineage, if you trace back. If you look in the beginning of Matthew, where it tells so-and-so begat so-and-so, and you'll see that out of the line of David was also Jesus. So he was the son of David. And we don't know what was going on in his mind. We do know that he had to believe that he was going to be healed. Because all of those people that were walking by, they would have said, he might have said, who's coming? Oh, no, it's just a crowd of people. He probably would have said, alms for the poor, alms, But when he heard the name of Jesus, then he said, here's my chance. Here's my chance.
Recognize the sincere faith that the man had.
That's right, and that's exactly what he's going to say here. Then Jesus said to him, "Go your way. Your what? Your faith has made you well." Or whatever in your particular translation it says. And immediately he received his sight, and he followed Jesus on the road. Immediately he received his sight, and he followed Jesus on the road. So to answer the question, what would you do in that situation? I'd follow him too. He's the one that just gave me sight where I didn't have sight. And he didn't give me eye drops and tell me to come back in a week. He healed his sight, and it was immediate. And so, and here's another interesting thing. If you look at the other Gospels, because there's not John's is not included in this, but Matthew and Luke, none of them speak of Bartimaeus. In fact, one of them speaks of 2 blind beggars on the road. This particular one names the name of one particular one. This, you can look at this, and I'm telling you this because somebody's going to point this out to you at some point. You know, the Bible's kind of, it's got its mistakes, because look what happened here. They don't mention Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus, we tend to remember Bartimaeus more than we do a lot of other characters from the Bible, and yet the other gospel writers don't mention. We do know that each one of the gospel writers had a direction that they were writing from. We know that when John wrote his gospel, he wrote it so that upon hearing of the story of Jesus, people would believe that he is the Son of God. So that was where John was headed. And Matthew had his direction that he was directing his stories. Then none of them tell all the stories of Jesus, because it's been said, if they did, it could fill up all the books in the world, and there's not enough books to fill. So they picked specific stories to make their point. If he was the servant, they made stories to show where he was the servant. If it made him to show that he was the king, then the stories would be told of him being the king. So if you put them all, they call them the synoptic gospels. If you put all those gospels together, then you get a pretty clear picture of everything that has to do with Jesus. Whereas if you just pick one, you don't get a total picture. So that's basically what's going on here.
Yeah, and people have different focus. It's like not everybody likes the same songs, so people, each of the gospel writers were impacted by different
Sure.
events,
Yep. And they were all, other than Luke, they were all Jewish. And Luke was, of course, the Dr. Luke, and he was
Greek.
not, he was a Gentile, he was a Greek. And so there was a whole background, most of these, and Mark, all I remember, when I think of Mark, about reading the Gospel of Mark, which is what we're doing, I remember that in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is being betrayed and and the soldiers are going to come and take him away, they try to grab this young fellow by his tunic, and he pulls out of the tunic, which makes him naked, pretty naked,
Yeah.
and not partially, but pretty totally, and he runs away. Well, guess who that was?
It was Mark.
That was Mark. That was Mark. Mark was like the rest of them. The scripture says, and I will strike the shepherd, and the flock will scatter. Jesus was the shepherd when he was struck, when he was betrayed and arrested. Everybody distanced themselves from him for fear that the guards, and in this case the Jewish temple guards, would associate him with, or associate the other disciples, and so they all ran away. And Jesus knew that that's what was going to happen. So that's Mark. And Mark also is hearing most of what he wasn't always there as an eyewitness to see this stuff, but he got a lot of it from Peter, and of course Peter was there all the time. So it's interesting that we don't have a gospel according to Peter. We have letters that Peter wrote, but Mark has done this. And the other thing is that we have Mark's He was the cousin of,
Bartimaeus.
no, not Bartimaeus, but
No, oh,
Barth. Son of Encouragement. No, I got all my bars mixed up.
Barnabas.
Barnabas, right, exactly. So he got,
He was Paul.
yes, they were going on a mission journey. Barnabas said, oh, bring Mark. Mark can be of help.
And Paul said.
So Paul says, oh, okay, all right, we'll bring Mark. Well, they got halfway through the journey, and Mark decided this wasn't his cup of tea, and he bailed and went back. They were from Cyprus. And so he started out poorly, really. He started out as not being very zealous, and yet he ends up writing one of the Gospels in the Bible that has managed to survive for all of these.
Not only that, but when Paul was in prison, at the end, he said, bring Mark, because he's very helpful to me.
Yeah.
So he did make a turnaround.
Yeah, he did make a turnaround. So what that says to me is, don't worry about where you're at.
There's always hope.
There's always hope. There's always hope.
There's always work being done that you don't see.
That's right, and that's exactly what it amounts to. So let me see if I got something here toward the end. Okay. How did Jews view? Okay, now we're getting back to Bartimaeus. How did the Jews at the time, what were they taught about why someone was born blind or born mute?
Curse or sins of the ancestors.
It was,
Due to sin.
yeah, they felt, and one of them is just oddball from our perspective. They believed that either it was the sin of him before he was born. Think on that a second. Or it was the sin of his parents that caused him to be born blind. When we read in Gospel of John, about the man born blind, and Jesus goes up and he's sitting, I think, in front of what they called the Gate Beautiful, which was a big bronze beautiful gate. Okay, so he's sitting in front of that gate, of course, begging. And he's in his 40s, I think, as I recall. And so Jesus walks up to him, and he goes through the whole process of actually healing him and making the mud and putting it on his eyes and telling him to go wash his face in the pool of Siloam. But the disciples that are with him said, Master, who was it that sinned? Was it him or was it his parents? And they, I don't know how you could believe that somebody sinned in the womb. What could you possibly have done in the womb?
Observe the Sabbath.
Maybe that was it. So they actually believed that it was not the result of the sin that the person committed, especially if they were born that way. Now, if they became blind later in life, say they were 20 years old or something, then there might be lots of other extenuating circumstances that you might say caused the person to have that. But he says, Jesus answers him, neither was he or his parents that sinned, but that the glory of God could be displayed. Glory of God, meaning he was going to heal them. So he was born blind for the express purpose of me coming and healing him. So he had those years many years, 40 years, that he was blind, and everybody in the neighborhood knew who he was. And that's also a great story. You want to read a very entertaining story, that's a good one to read. His talking with the religious leaders. Yeah, it's very, very humorous. So here they are. Jesus is stopping to work with this man who's blind. And in the back of their head, depending on what happened first, whether the man born blind had come before this and they already knew, they didn't seem to retain a lot of information sometimes. Sometimes the disciples they heard it. They'd heard 3 times that he was going to be betrayed by the Gentiles and put to death, and they still went over the top of their head and they didn't get it. So that was kind of how they viewed things. Now, when we see somebody, just think about it for a second. Think about the person that you see begging on the highway, not the people that are perfectly healthy, but the person that's there that's obviously got all kinds of problems. Sometimes psychological problems, quite often psychological problems. I think the important thing for us to realize is that Jesus died for him on the cross, just like he died for us on the cross. He was worthy of another soul was saved, the angels. So there was a feeling or we have a feeling that, wow, I feel badly for this guy, and he's really, maybe he's had a double amputee, maybe he's got no legs, maybe he's in a wheelchair, maybe he's whatever. But they're usually pretty dirty and pretty unkept, and our first impression is one of kind of
Keep your distance.
yeah, right. But what we need to remind ourselves is we could have been born in that situation. We weren't. And we need to pray for the guy, and Marge's viewpoint is that when somebody's in a wheelchair and it's got both legs missing or one of his legs missing, that's who she's going to drop some money in his bucket or whatever. As opposed to the guy who's got a dog with him, he's got his cigarettes going, he's perfectly healthy.
And when he leaves, he goes around to his Porsche, his park.
Well, even if he doesn't do that, even if he goes,
there are those too.
even if he goes back and goes back to his tent under the overpass, still, those people existed in these days too. These people begging on the side. I don't know if you've ever been to Mexico City or not, but the one and only time that I've been to Mexico City, there's all kinds of beggars. There are ladies, especially. Well, yeah, in Tijuana too.
The women lay the kids across the sidewalk, so you either gotta
You got to walk down into the road to get around them or whatever. But the thing is, you got to listen to your heart. You really do. You can't just, I have to repeat that what we need to do is remember Jesus died for them. And he will also honor what you do for them, regardless of whether it's a scam they're pulling or whether it's not a scam that they're pulling. God is going to honor what you did because you had the heart to want to help them.
It's not about what they're doing, it's about what you
Yeah,
do.
yeah, this is an opportunity
In
for
other
us.
words, God knows your heart, knows the person's heart.
That's right, He
right.
sure does. Yep, that's right. God always dispenses faith, pardon me, grace. Grace is a free gift of God, right? That's what grace is.
Unmerited favor.
Unmerited favor, that's right. God dispenses. If you go to a dispensary, that's an old term. You go to the dispensary, especially if you were in the military, you go to the dispensary, that meant you went to the clinic. And they would dispense or give out whatever help was necessary. If it meant you needed to get an aspirin or whatever it was, that's where you would go. So God dispenses grace, but we need the faith to reach out and to accept it. And that's exactly what Bartimaeus was happening with him.
You reached out.
He reached out, he probably yelled at the top of his lungs that he needed help.
Wow.
And Jesus saw that and recognized the faith that the man had. And he knew, there's no understanding really. I mean, we can only understand or guess what's going on in the mind of God or the mind of the person that's there. But we can notice body language. We can notice the way a person talks. If they're humble or whether they're arrogant. If you're down in well, you don't have to be in Mexico. You can be in Texas. And if you walk up to the guy that's begging and with the intent of wanting to help him, and he says, "What do you want, gringo?"
Oh, wow.
What do you want, gringo? If he says that, your whole concept of wanting to help him kind of went out the window. He doesn't have a heart that's eager to be helped. Doesn't sound like it to me. These are not easy things to think about, easy things to make a decision on, right? They're not. It's very, very difficult. Yes, ma'am.
I had a decision to make yesterday. I went to JCPenney's because I was looking for some clothes. And as I was walking in, there was this lady with a little child, maybe 6, maybe 5. And she was begging for money. And a lot of people were coming and giving her some, and I gave her some. Well, as I was walking away, she grabbed me by my blouse, and she didn't speak English, so I couldn't understand what she was saying. But she was pointing towards the child, and that he had a hole in his knee, on his jeans.
Oh, a
And
hole
she
in his
kept-
pants.
Yeah, she kept pointing to it. I don't know if she wanted me to give her money or buy
For the
him
clothes.
pants.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do either, I kept thinking about it later, and I thought, I wonder if she wanted me to give her more money or what. I had given her everything I had in my, I usually don't carry a lot of cash with me.
Yeah.
So.
Was
I
she
just
was
prayed
she
for her.
speaking Spanish to you?
No,
Oh,
no,
she
because I
wasn't.
would have understood her.
Sure, that's what I was
She
thinking.
was probably maybe Indian,
Ah,
from
okay.
India.
Yeah, from India, right?
So, I don't know, I never did give her any, or buy a pair of pants for the little boy. I didn't know what size anyway.
Yeah.
But I just prayed for her after,
Yeah,
because
that's
I didn't
good.
know what to do, because I'd already given her what I had.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
So, but it was kind of like thinking,
We're faced with those kind of decisions all the time, and we have to have kind of an attitude. We have to decide. Okay, if I'm in this situation, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? Exactly. How am I going to react to this?
There was another instance some years back where I was on Stastny going east, on Stastny and I-35, and there was this little old man begging, and I was prompt to give him something, and I had some money with me, but I didn't do it. Well, it bothered me, and I went all the way around, came back, and he was gone. And I have never forgotten that.
I can see how you might not have forgotten that.
That sounds
Yeah,
like the
I
difference
didn't
between
do it.
spirit-led and not. In other words, the spirit will lead you, because I can remember in New Orleans going, and then I smoked, and I was still a child with disobedience. I was praying, but I wasn't walking right. And I went in to buy something in the store, and I had $5 change left, and I kept noticing this black woman that was standing by the register while he was ringing up people. And I went back out, and she had walked outside while I did my prayers, and was standing by the pump, and I went to get in the car, and it was like something grabbed me and pulled me back and said, "You have to give that woman that $5 now." And I'm like, okay, it was God speaking to me. So I went over and gave her the money, and she said, "Give me your name and number, I will write it down, I'll pay it back." I said, "No, just pay it forward." And it turned out, because she was in, and this is like years ago, I was in my 20s, she was in a white neighborhood. The cashier would not let her use the phone to call her husband
Oh,
to
geez.
come rescue her. So she was like stuck and probably praying. And look, I had one foot in the truck. My boyfriend was driving, I was almost in there, and it was like, I could not go any further. God wanted me to give that to her, and I did, and it was exactly enough for her to get home. And I've had other instances where, like, when God moves you, when you feel it that strong, it's spirit-led.
Yeah.
But when they're grabbing you, and demanding that you do something that,
Yeah, that kind of throws that.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay, let's